Today on the Nostaljunk podcast, I sit down with Dave from the Super Movie Bros podcast, and we begin to chat about his favorite horror movie, which is Alien, and how I tie it into the slasher genre. And then things kind of get out of control, but I won't spoil anything. I'll leave you hanging. You just got to hear how this hilarious conversation plays out. That's all next on the Nostaljunk podcast. This is the Nostaljunk podcast, where one person's junk is another person's childhood. I'm Matt McGraw.
And I'm Kyle Smith. Join us as we take a deep dive into your pop culture consciousness.
You were touching on Alien.
For sure.
Let's go with Alien because Alien's right around the time of what I'm currently talking about, and I wanted to tie something in with you once you're done. So you riff on Alien.
Yeah, sure. I mean, 1979, man. 1 year after Star Wars had come out. Every studio out there is looking for the next Star Wars. 20th Century Fox had a script that had been sitting around, written by I believe the name was O'Bannon, and it was a space adventure. You know, there was an alien, it was on a ship and stuff like that. It had space in it, which was enough for a studio to greenlight any project at the time in and around Star Wars. So this gets greenlit, and they get a hotshot young director who just came off of Cannes Film Festival with his film The Duel, Ridley Scott. They bring him in, major script changes are done, and they really turn this, what was like an action adventure type movie, into a dark, very realistic feeling sci-fi horror flick, Alien. And they get H.R. Giger to do the art, which is just absolutely phenomenal. Everything in there that is Alien related, as far as the xenomorphs go, which they weren't called that at this time, but that the xenomorphs are concerned, the egg, the face hugger, the xenomorph itself, that's all Giger's art. And the Nostromo it becomes in itself like a cabin in the woods, you know, like when you watch a movie like Evil Dead, practically the entire movie takes place within that cabin. And the Nostromo very much is that same setting. You know, it becomes a cabin where people, you feel claustrophobic, you feel stuck, you feel trapped in there along with this creature, because the only thing outside is the vacuum of space. And then of course, you also have the threat from inside their own group, coming from Ash, the android. It's just so perfectly well done and comes together in just such a way that I don't think anything has. I mean, things have come close to it, but I don't think anything has really touched it in the sci-fi horror genre in quite some time. I mean, we might get into a movie that came out in 1982 that gets very close, John Carpenter film, but this is just by far when I think of sci-fi horror, I put this up there in like my number one spot. And for Alien, you know, it has this incredible history that goes with it, because in 86, obviously, we got a sequel, which is I would not say that is an action horror, or that is a sci-fi horror. That is a sci-fi action thriller, but I wouldn't put horror in there with Aliens. But with Alien, I can say that's a horror film for sure. And I think just about every sequel that's come out after Aliens has done nothing but to tarnish the original, if anything. But, you know, we still get Ridley Scott out there trying to do what he did with Alien now in his late 70s, and it just doesn't work. You know, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, I just don't go with it. But it has one of the most fascinating behind the scenes stories behind it as well, from you know, Ridley Scott being an absolute dictator of a director, to, you know, people wanting to leave set and stuff like that. It's honestly it's pretty amazing that the film got made, given how much it went over budget and over filming schedule. And it was also filmed right in the same location as Star Wars, and everything that you see inside the Nostromo was 100% built on a set on a soundstage. They could have phoned it in and left the top open and stuff like that and just filmed it low, but Ridley Scott wanted the actors to feel as claustrophobic as possible. So he made them build basically the entire inside of this ship, and those actors spent 16 hours a day inside this set.
God.
So he was directing from a place where it's like, well, they may not be method actors, they may not be living this character, but by God, their days will be filled with what this character's days would have been filled with.
Right. It's torment.
Yes, but Sigourney Weaver said as much, that it was torment. So much so that the alien chestburster scene that happens, they knew that scene was coming. It's in the script. They've all read the script. They know it's coming. What they weren't told was the effects that were going to be used, what the creature would look like, and what would happen. So they get brought in, and they're doing this scene, and John Hurt is lying there screaming like a banshee, looking like he's really hurt, and this chestbuster is just thumping out of his chest, and they used an air hammer to do it through the prosthetic of his chest. And they said it's like they actually made weaving and like bones for it to crack through, so it sounded like actual bones breaking. So you got an air hammer that's thumping, you got this loud cracking sound, and eventually as it bursts open, they spray everybody in there with blood. None of these actors were prepared for this, and they're getting sprayed with blood. And then this little thing comes out, turns, looks at them, and then fires across the table. None of them were prepared for any of that. So all of their reactions are absolutely legitimate. It is actually what happened on the screen. And Veronica Cartwright, who played Lambert in the film, she actually broke down crying like after this.
Oh, man.
Because it was so torturous to her.
Right.
You hear stories like that about one of your favorite films, and you just go like, that's amazing. And so many movies have these type of like background stories. Some of them are fun, some of them are like amazing, some of them are truly horrific. Alien is just one of those things that like deep down inside, I saw it at an age when I want to say like early mid-teens, like we'll say like 14, 15. And I'm just getting out of like I grew up loving Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, Star Wars, Goonies, like these 80s action movies, these 80s adventure movies that kind of created who I was. We just did a top 5 on my show called the top 5 movies that made us. Mm-hmm. And those are the movies that made me, because I watched them when I was knee-high to a duck. And that kind of influenced my watching. But once you get into like that angsty teenage years, yes, that same stuff, while it's still nostalgic for you, it doesn't do it for you. You can't watch that every weekend anymore. Mm-hmm. So I began looking for stuff like Alien and like The Thing, and later on slashers like Friday the 13th, and definitely the Halloween series was more my jam though. I remember being like 15 and eating up the Halloween series like no other, and just absolutely loving every minute of the original Halloween, from the score just to the incredibly slow, methodic movements of Michael Myers. Like mm-hmm. there's so much to love there when I was a kid. But like Alien fits right along in that. It is this absolutely crazy, just immersive experience for you when you're young, and the first time seeing it, you're watching it alone in a dark room with your covers and a bag of Oreos or whatever right next to you, and you're just you're equal parts like amazed, but also just a little bit like scared shitless. You got like that nervous sweat around your ball sack,
Yep.
And then you realize that like everything's shriveled up inside you, and you were like, I really was just a little scared.
Yeah,
not so much of a man now.
The description that you just gave, I've been scared for 35 years, son.
I was in a pool.
just all
sitting in my office, just sitting in my office chair.
Yeah, that's it. So what I was going to touch on with Alien was, and tying it into the slasher genre, was the notion of the final girl. Ellen Ripley, the character, of course, is kind of like the archetype for what final girls could be, as also being the ultimate final girl. She isn't the helpless vacationing party victim.
Right.
But the Venn diagram that ties them together is that they are industrious. They are able to make their own decisions. They are virtuous in the sense that they don't partake in extracurriculars that will distract them or set them up for their inevitable end. So, in the slasher genre, it's easy to love the killer more than the victims because they're one-dimensional and they're usually quite stupid.
Well, also in a series, they also become your focal point. They become your tie to the series. Like,
most certainly.
The people being killed, the victims, they change every time. But the one constant when you're watching the series is it's the killer for the most part.
Yeah. And in Alien, it's equal part, this is the coolest creature I've ever seen. I'd love to see more of this, to I want to see what kills it.
But isn't it also the sexual nature of that creature? Isn't it equally as odd to look at this creature with a giant phallus for a head?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, we've already talked about ball sacks, so yes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, but that's Giger's art, man. Like, Giger's art is just that. A face hugger, when it's splayed out, is a vagina, and it's the delivery system for the egg. So, I mean, like, there's no bones about it. It's very creepy, but also at the same time when you're watching it, you're recognizing that it's slightly sensual in a way that makes you feel just the right amount of awkward.
Exactly. and that kind of speaks to the strife that occurs between Ripley and the xenomorphs.
No, I believe originally in the script Ripley was meant to be male. It wasn't a positive thing to portray a female survivor in this way. That wasn't what it was. I think more along the lines of like 70s mind processing would be, wouldn't it be different? Wouldn't it be cool if it was a girl? Like that's kind of like how the change was made. I think in retrospect, Bannon and some of the other screenwriters have said that they purposely wanted to go out there and make a woman. But let's face it, if the studio didn't want it that way, then they wouldn't have allowed it to happen. But I think in retrospect, you can look at it at that way that you're talking about, where it is the giant phallic monster who's chasing her and stuff, and it's her to survive. But how does she survive? She lies dormant and has to wait for her time to strike.
Right.
So
yeah, but I guess that again that speaks to waiting for the time to strike and a change of social change. We're talking about a movie here, and the more that I was looking into the slasher genre throughout the 70s, you see quite an upstream, unfortunately, of sensationalized serial killings televised and becoming a part of pop culture, and these serial killers end up becoming discussion points around the world, and people talk about it around the water coolers. They stay with you when you go to sleep at night. They become a part of your subconsciousness. That the appeal of finding out why a killer kills is also the sick, twisted lure that is entertaining of a slasher film, because some of it is filmed.
It has become fetishism for sure.
Right. And, in 74, Black Christmas, that was one of those first of a proto slasher, but not the perfected Carpenter Halloween being the as what I feel is the true first of it, because it was so close to the era that ended up becoming like, oh, let's turn out this low budget, high rate of return kind of slasher film. Black Christmas allowed the audience to experience the killings from the killer's perspective point of view. It happened in 1960 from a movie called Peeping Tom that was kind of overshadowed by Psycho because they came out at the same time.
Right. I'd say there's a lot of people that make the argument that Psycho is the original slasher. However, I don't think the elements of what is in Halloween that make like the modern slasher are all there in Psycho. Psycho's far more psychological and cerebral than anything in like Halloween, because what makes the slasher genre so I want to say like not just popular but like kind of what defines it is that it's an unstoppable killing machine. There isn't much psychology to it unless you're watching the Rob Zombie version of Halloween, in which case then it's far too much psychobabble. But if you're just talking about Carpenter's original Halloween, there's there's almost zero motive, and what they do find is only a plausible motive. But when you get into something like Psycho, it is so, what is going on is kind of so dissected and stuff by the time the film ends, and it's almost fully realized he's not the unstoppable killing machine. He had a name, it was Norman Bates. So
right.
While Michael Myers is a name, his name in the credits is not Michael Myers.
It's The Shape.
It's The Shape. So,
which is also why I'm calling episode 2 The Shape of Slashers to Come.
Ah, look at you with the puns.
Well, also
puns.
Kyle, his favorite album of all time is The Refused, The Shape of Punk to Come. So I was like, I'll tie it in.
And we have a beer that comes out around here from the Chamonix Creek Brewing called The Shape of Hops to Come.
Okay. Fair enough. So, but so that was kind of my little tie-in to Alien and slasher being of the era, and that kind of cyber horror world that came after it, using the 80s aesthetic, that 84 Terminator tech noir kind of vibe.
For sure. I think you're on to something. You're on to something there. While Alien may have gone on to define its own genre of like sci-fi horror moving forward, it still is in that horror vein. And the filmmakers behind a lot of other slasher films, and I'm not talking about Carpenter directly, I'm talking about the ones that came after him to the later horror films, are definitely influenced by the things that came before, like Alien and stuff like that. So I don't think there's a filmmaker today who, if you ask them, a horror filmmaker today, if you ask them like about Alien, they couldn't go on anything less than a 20-minute diatribe about why they love it. Like I listened to a talk from Alex Garland. He's the director of Ex Machina and Annihilation, and now he has come out with the TV series Devs. And then even before that, what I love that I just found out is he actually ghost directed Dread 3D. After the original director left, he's a massive fan of Alien. Like absolutely massive fan. So you can see the influences, especially when you watch like Annihilation, of Alien on him as a filmmaker. And it's not Annihilation, an all-female cast practically. So
I did really like Annihilation. I thought that was super cool.
I absolutely loved it. It's one of those things that, like, if me and you start getting into it, it'll be like a 6-hour discussion. It was a hard movie for me to review, to explain to people why I liked it so much. Because it's like, watch it 3 more times and then come to me and talk to me.
Sure.
Because I've watched it I've watched it a ton of times since then, and it's one of those things where like your opinion on what's going on changes.
Yep.
And I think that's like a purposeful thing on their part, though, where it's like there is a rhyme or reason, but it's beyond us as a human species to even understand it.
Yeah, for sure. And when you were talking about Alien being kind of the first of the horror, before that, like you said, sci-fi existed within fantasy, kind of like almost like a riff off of a prince and a princess and this mythical kind of thing. Whereas I felt the same way. The Alien was my sci-fi because I could appreciate it, the fact that it was horror based. It just so happened to be in space. Like, that's the difference. Like, that's how it felt. Maybe it is to what you said, that genuine reaction of isolation and being confined in a very tight set, being uncomfortable, catching genuine reactions to special effects that they've never seen before. So that element of surprise is real. And that's the real horror that's it's captured.
Right. And it's so different than the horror sci-fi that we were getting in like the 50s, where, you get the close-up shot of the blonde bombshell looking up in the sky at nothing. Because that's what she was seeing, screaming and reacting to nothing. And then they would, put film over top of film, and they filmed the giant tarantula and it's walking around and stuff like that. Like, that was the old sci-fi. Now, that stuff's kitschy. It's fun. There's a ton to love there, too, in that genre. But, Alien was kind of like, at least the first time that I'm watching it. I mean, we can get into John Carpenter's, like, Dark Star and stuff like that, but we won't. But, like, Alien's, like, the first time where, like, mass media, it was that genre completely flipped on its head. You know, and a lot of people went and saw this because they just came out of the theaters the summer before, and their minds were blown by Star Wars, and here we go. We're going back to space, and it wasn't too far removed from 2001: A Space Odyssey as well.
So thank you for bringing that up. That is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think that 2001, although is very canon, like you cannot give its due if you like it or not. It's one of those films that, yes, it is important, but it is important in so many ways of not only the storytelling, the framing. We know Kubrick as an eye was great, but its influence on the technology that ended up being incorporated into sci-fi,
for sure.
His sets. Like, I'm looking back now, on the Blu-ray copies, and then, if you have an old VHS copy of it, when you compare them, you still cannot tell. It still looks so good. They don't look like miniatures. And then as far as, the camera placements and his tricks with filming the centrifuge, like to the point where people are just still studying a 1968 piece of film going, okay, how did he actually film that?
How did they do that? Right. I mean, one of my favorite stories of 2001. We just did a Patreon episode for it where I made Jay rewatch it here in the home theater. I have a projector and put the lights down and stuff. You wear noise canceling headphones and stereo and stuff, which I like. Was the only way we can experience 2001. We watched that and The Shining back to back. I don't recommend doing that. Don't recommend.
Those are two forms of isolation I could do without right now.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. One of my favorite stories from it was the fact that one of the last things that they shot, and it's one of the simplest effects, absolutely simplest effects, but it took them forever to figure out how to do it. It was the pen floating on the shuttle,
right,
on its way to the moon base.
So awesome.
And they couldn't figure out how to do it, because they tried string. You could see the string. Kubrick was not happy with that. They tried magnets, but they couldn't keep it steady. It kept moving. It kept moving around, out of shot, and stuff like that. So what they wound up doing was an ultra polished piece of glass floating there.
Yeah,
and it was just clear enough that you don't see it. And they had to make it attached to the glass. And they also had to make it so fine that she was able to reach up and pluck that pen off of it and put it in his pocket. Mm-hmm. And that was the effect that drove Kubrick nuts for, I believe it was 3 years or something like that.
Not trying to make sure that the ending feels buttoned up or anything that he's stressed over. No. Get that pen floating.
Right, but what I mean is the scene with the ring spinning around and him running and stuff like that, which is that didn't cause him sleepless nights, right? Like, he went in there and he knew how he was going to film that.
Yes,
but he didn't know how to film that pen.
I love it,
and I think that's one of those movie magic stories that drives me insane, that I just absolutely love. When we when you think about Jurassic Park, and it's something so simple. How do you just make that glass of water? How do you make it ripple? Mm-hmm. No one could figure it out. It took weeks. Guess what? You just tie a guitar string underneath the dashboard and you pluck it, and it works. Right? And it's the simplest solution to these big problems. But it's so fascinating the way that because I wouldn't have thought of that. No. You wouldn't have thought of that. But I mean it took Kubrick sleepless nights to figure how clear can we make glass? How clear can we get glass?
I know it's clear.
Yeah, I know. I know it's clear, but I mean, can I not get someone's filthy mitts all over? I don't want a fucking smudge on it. Not one smudge.
That's right.
I just need the clearest piece of glass, and the ultra super fine. I want the hair on a baby's ass type of Velcro, so that she could pluck it off. Not how Kubrick talked.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you sir have super fine hearing. What you just heard were two cotton balls being rubbed together on a piece of felt. I just love when movies nod to other things that you're a fan of, be it a music or movie or something like that, and you hear a line there, you're like, oh man, that's from that, and where you laugh to yourself and you realize you're the only one laughing, you're like, that's fine, because that exists for me only. Those are those things that keep me in.
Isn't it like true nostalgic heads, like anyone who's like listening right now, like we started a conversation by talking about Alien, and then we brought it into the slasher genre, and then we brought it back to 2001, and we just brought it back to Alien and then the modern Alien movies. Like, I mean, that's what this nostalgia is. That's what it does.
Most certainly. Like, yeah. That's what it does. Yeah. It riffs off of itself. I mean, you cannot once nostalgia becomes a nostalgia, that means it meant something.
Yeah,
So then anything that comes after that makes you feel like you can reference it, or you spot references. Well, for instance, Toy Story, and you see the shining carpet, and then you hear
for sure. Yeah.
Toy Story 4, and you hear that song playing on the record player at the antique shop. I'm the dad going, oh man, that's awesome.
Right. Or like something as simple as like I watched It and It Chapter 2, and I was just like, yeah, I'm going to watch The Shining. And then like it just happened to be that like Dr. Sleep was coming out, and I was like, I'm going to watch Dr. Sleep. And then I went and saw Dr. Sleep in the theaters, and I was like, that was awesome.
Yes, it was.
I'm going to watch The Shining. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know whether you're like this or not. So maybe I'm not sure if this is just a disease I have. My co-host Jay always talks about I have this disease, and it needs to go away because it causes me to do far more homework for our show than I really need to do. But so like when you watch something, do you have the need to then watch other things in that genre like right after it, if not just the direct sequels? Because
yes.
we did our Alien 3 movie cocktail a couple months back, and while watching Alien 3, I was just like halfway through it, I was like, you know what, I feel like I need to just experience all of this like in a row. So I'm going to watch Alien, I'm going to watch Aliens, and then I'm going to watch Alien 3, then I'll watch Alien Resurrection, then I'll watch AVP, and then I'll watch Requiem. All right, well, now I got to go back and I got to watch the Predator movies, and then I got to watch The Predator, and then hate myself after watching The Predator and hate Shane Black for coming back and doing it. And then, but like, that,
yeah,
I
the
think
whole
that's
lineage.
Right. There's like a disease to like your nostalgia
Yes.
at a time. And I find myself falling into it so much where like I wind up and I call it research, but really what it is just like I wind up watching this thing that puts me in the mood to watch other things like it that I love, and then I just continue on down the line. Sometimes I'll seek out new things that are in that vein as well, but for the most part it's just loving the things that I love and celebrating them in my own way, and in that way it's binge watching, usually not leaving my underwear until 3 p.m. and my wife going, are you gonna do anything today? And I was like, yeah, just as soon as this is done.
Yeah, I'm doing plenty. Thank you.
Yeah, this is research.
Refill,
for my
please.
Show. Dude, what do you do?
Yeah.
What's your side gig? Doing the dishes? Get out of here.
Your mom goes to college. But no, you immerse yourself in the universe of whatever you're watching just to make sure that you don't miss anything, right?
Right.
That's what you convince yourself of. Aside, you're putting your like love and the heart rate and all that aside, and memories, and channeling that moment when you first see it. Like, just like you said, you keep going, and you can't watch 3 until you watch 1 and 2 fresh, and then you can't watch 4, and then you got to go on and on. You got to watch all the bad ones in between, even if they have nothing to do. And
if it's been over a week or two, then I got to start the process over again because it's not fresh enough in my mind.
It's either that, you scrap it, or you start a new franchise right afterwards.
Right? Yeah. I remember like leading into the Rise of Skywalker and stuff like that. I was like, I was just on Disney Plus, and I was like, even though I own it on Disney Plus, it's in Ultra HD, which I have an Ultra HD TV, but I only have a Blu-ray player, so it's only 1080p, not Ultra HD. So I watched Rogue One in like Ultra HD, and I was like, oh.
Right.
This is phenomenal. And then like I was like, all right, so I'll go back, I'll watch all the originals, and then I'll watch the prequels, and then I'll watch the other 2 that lead into the Rise of Skywalker. And boy, do I not recommend that. Because you get filled with so much Star Wars nostalgia that when you go into the Rise of Skywalker and you just feel the weight of that dump that was just taken onto your chest.
Yeah.
It hurts
and
so much more. It's like one of Nibbler's dumps from Futurama, where it's super dense and it's the weight of a dark star and it just weighs on you, and you're just like, fuck. I did this with my wife recently, where I was just like, that was the initial sting, right? Like the prequels all stung me a little bit, but I've grown in appreciation to them. So, and I did the same with Solo. I hated Solo the first time I saw it. I've watched it several times. I've grown and I've appreciated it in a way. And I bought The Rise of Skywalker on Blu-ray. I was watching it with my wife, and she goes, "How's that sting?" And I was like, "Still fresh, you know. If I don't stop picking it, it's never going to heal."
That's it. That's right. Oh my god. But yeah, and you got to watch the bad ones, right? And you end up falling in love with them in their own miserable way.
I love Alien versus Predator, and I won't apologize for it.
Not Requiem, just the Alien.
Not
AVP.
Requiem.
Yeah,
just AVP. I do retroactively wish it was rated R. I feel like you're neutering your own genre that you helped create,
sure.
by making it PG-13 and looking for them dollar bills that still never came.
No.
But but while watching it, there's still things to like, right? Like it's still, the little kid in me who was buying the Dark Horse comics of Alien versus Predator, because fuck, I always wanted to see that ever since I saw the Predator put a human skull right next to a xenomorph skull, and I went, I never realized that I wanted that until this very moment in my life. And then suddenly I became a kid seeking out that stuff, and I found it in the Dark Horse comics, and here it is, live on TV for me. And the premise for it wasn't bad. It was plausible, it was believable, it worked. You had your final girl and everything like that, and she was rough, tough, tumble. And then you're watching, and you're like, oh, but they didn't flesh out any other character at all, or really give any story to these aliens that are bashing each other at all. Yeah, it's not good.
It's
but I enjoy
for the
it.
Fans though. Like,
but it is. Right.
It's for the people that don't care about the gaps. It's like myself. I actually really enjoyed Freddy versus Jason. It is not good. It is not my first go-to recommended for anyone to watch either one of them, but I think it's such...
You can't enjoy that without the entire pantheon of what came before it.
Exactly.
You can't understand the joke of something unless you understand that thing.
You could watch any other Freddy or Jason movie to come after it because it doesn't set up anything for anything. It's literally a day at the arcade, and you played Freddy versus Jason just because it was there.
So are you like me? Are you upset that you didn't get the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash that was being set up?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I thought the story made so much sense, They get their hands on the Necronomicon, and then that causes Jason to rise because he's technically a Deadite again, and like all this stuff, and Ash has to come in, and they did it in the Boom comics and stuff, but it's not the same as being on screen, man. It just God, that would have been so good. I think but like I said, I don't think I could have loved it without having seen what came before it and understanding it.
Yeah.
I don't love the hero aspect of Jason, which really as a viewer watching it, just being like,
right.
I'm rooting for him in the end. And I was like, why am I rooting for him?
Well, that's what's so crazy about slashers is that, when you're dissecting the actual slasher character, there's so many variations of it. But there's always a formula that seems to follow suit, which is, a trauma from before their sadistic side takes over. In Jason's side, it was a childhood trauma.
Right.
Had a really crazy mother.
Well, also the post-traumatic stress of being ignored and almost drowning, or
exactly. That's
drowning.
what I'm saying, right? So he drowned, he died, but
yeah.
Okay,
I mean, isn't there's a debate whether he actually is a living human being in the second one or not.
I would say he is, because
I think he's alive in the second one. It's that one that he is killed and then becomes the undead.
Yes. Rest in peace. And
for sure.
But Freddy, he goes from being wonderfully sadistic from even 1 and 2, 3 he starts getting one-liners and laughing. But yet, that's when the characters start the victims are now that one-dimensional. I don't actually care if they live or not. I actually think the kill is pretty cool.
Most of the victims you downright hate. Like, I mean, I think even Halloween did that, right? I mean,
Yes.
and that's the point of the drunk teenager, sleeping around, spouting, slang from that era out and stuff when they're hanging out, and they're kind of jerks to the adults and stuff like that. And you watch and you're just like, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
If I knew you in high school, I would hope something bad would happen to you. And then at that moment, something, poor Jimmy gets pinned to the wall with a fucking kitchen knife, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for you.
But I think that's what separates Jason from everyone else, is that he was kind of the helpless. He was a product of neglect, whereas Freddy, there could be any number of backstories, but yet you can't really justify the child killings and
No, you can't, right?
Right? So he's a really unlikable guy. But we end up cheering for him.
You cheer for him because of the creativity and way he does it too.
Yes.
Like, I mean, pulling someone's veins out and then using them as a marionette to jump off of a clock tower.
So cool.
It's fantastic. And you're just like, you know what? I'm sorry that kid's dead. He was a bit of an asshole. He had time to change. He was going to be an adult and stuff. Perhaps maybe a productive member of society. Probably not coming from a mental health institute. But it was really cool the way Freddy killed him. I'm happy to
I'm
be
all in
a
with
witness
this
to
death.
that.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be a participant in this.
Which is amazing, because the more I was reading on these slashers was the amount of critical backlash that was trying to be dished out to the tastes of society by making these films popular, and the production companies and the studios that were producing these movies, they were bashing them, they were giving them no stars and things like that.
Come on, man! This is the post-Vietnam era, and even though slashers kind of started towards the end of the 1970s, make no bones about it, America was still healing mentally, politically from the Vietnam War era and from Nixon and stuff. People were being let down by their country. I'm not making any type of inference into what's going on today. I totally am, but and people needed to let loose. It's why things like Star Wars were so popular, because it's complete escapism, and that is what a slasher is as well, right? You're satiating your bloodlust, but you're not getting your hands bloody. It is our own personal purge when you go and you watch these. It's cathartic in a way, but I think it also it's healthy. I mean, there's a reason that in the Roman Colosseums, gladiators killed each other for so long. The citizens weren't killing each other.
Yes,
because it's cathartic, and there is you can sit there and you can say that man is animalistic and stuff like that, and sure. We are, because we are the human animal. And then you can go back, you can watch 2001 and watch that ape beat another ape to death with a bone, and see that that is who we are deep down inside as a species. We are violent, and I think it's our humanity that makes us fight that violence, and that's good. I don't think anyone should ever give in to violence or anything like that. But it is cathartic to watch this type of stuff from a psychological standpoint. And I should know. I have my master's in forensic psychology, so
there you go.
So you heard it here first. I'm not a doctor, but pretty darn close.
I play one on TV.
But I play one on TV.
Yeah.
But we started off talking about true crimes and stuff like that. I have a degree in criminology. I spent a lot of time investigating these true crimes and stuff like that. And it's crazy how I can listen to a podcast on true crime, which has completely dominated our podcast as a genre and stuff like that. But, or watch a documentary on true crime and just go, what absolute heinous acts. This person disgusts me to my core, because it's real.
Yeah.
But then when I go watch a movie, it's not real.
No.
The same side of myself is able to differentiate what's going on in the movie. Now, I want the movie to be believable in some way, at least in its own world, which is why Freddy works. It's completely unbelievable in the real world. But in Freddy's world, in that Wes Craven world, it makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And it satiates just that monkey brain side of me that just wants to smash everything. I'm Super Movie Brother Dave of the Super Movie Bros podcast. You can check us out on any podcatcher of choice. Everyone thinks that iTunes is the only place to find podcasts. That's not right. We're on the Podbean app. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify. We're everywhere you can listen to podcasts. So just search Super Movie Bros podcast, BROS. And that's it. You can follow me on social media at Super Movie Pod. On Twitter, follow us on Instagram. Just search it. You'll find it. It's not that hard. This is the content we produce on a weekly basis. You know what you're getting now. You've signed up for it.
Yep, you got it. That's awesome, man. Well, thanks. We'll do this again.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll send you some of these recipes that we've worked up for horror movies and stuff. Maybe you'd like to share it with some of your listeners, and
awesome, dude.
Maybe they'll enjoy it and jump on board and take some movie cocktail rides along with us.
That's right. When we think of Nostaljunk, we like to think of cock and tail.
That's right. And being drunk while you're thinking of cock and tail. So
that's right. Thank you, Super Movie Bro.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Adios, man.